everybody. Welcome to the Mud and Rib podcast.
Hello, hello, hello. Good to be with you again.
So what are we talking about today?
So today we thought that we would engage in church hurt because there's so many people around us who talk about how wounded they are, and because so many churches in our state of Texas and leaders have been kind of in the news and a lot of not so good stuff.
You want to talk a little bit about that? What are some of the things that we've seen?
Well, of course, you have lots of just inappropriate sexual behavior. You have inappropriate use of funds, abusing people, not only sexually, mentally, and like tyrannic type of leadership, almost just like a dictator type of stuff. And so we've had several of those, and then taking over polity, like even people changing the politics and the way that they're structured to take over these churches and leadership, single leaders taking over the political structure, which the church with political structure, that's a hot mess in and of itself. And we'll get into that. But those are just to name a few. And this has all happened the last couple of years a lot with mostly mega churches in Texas.
One of the things I read is, and that I've also seen on other podcasts, so we're not the first people to talk about it, is just this whole purity culture and some of the things that has created for people. The different things that people have been hurt by in the church are endless. I have kind of maybe on a more, those are kind of big ticket items,
Sure,
that we talk about, and not to say that these types of things are any less damaging, but they're not things that necessarily affect the church as a whole. They're more on an individual level that I thought I would share just a little bit about. And so I did a little bit of an interview with a few people and just thought I would share. So one of the main things that out of several people that I talked to is when people share something that they feel like is in a safe environment, that later being used against them. Maybe they shared their sin, they shared a fault, just a vulnerability that was later used against them. And this is people who are on staff at churches.
Right.
Specifically. Now, I also know that I have experienced that before, not being on staff somewhere, just where in the Christian community within the church that you share something and it's either spread as a rumor or, spread around, maybe not as a rumor, but how things get skewed by the time they get to someone else. No context or used against you. Also, just constant confidentiality breaches, the Bible being used as a weapon against some, but not others. Twisting the words of a person to gain or to control, abuse of power, which we already talked about in financial abuse, leaders putting people in uncomfortable positions by telling them things that they shouldn't know, but then later being upset with them about the fact that they know that. This really happens. This is real stuff. Speaking negatively about people, hoping that they will get you to say something about that person. I've seen that before. Continuously watching higher up leaders be toxic and untrustworthy and taking down the ones who were good and healthy. And somehow believing that after seeing that so much that maybe that's really how God wants things to be. And so those are just a few of the things that people have shared that have been hurts within the church. Do you have any stories maybe or things that you think of personally that we've experienced?
Well, sure. I mean, there's been one of the things that I feel like that, and we will talk about this, is that the structure of the church in America is more of a corporate structure. If you're going to incorporate, that means a corporate structure comes with it. And I remember being in staff meetings at one of the churches that we've served at, and there was a Venn diagram drawn that says, this is the cause, this is the community, and this is the corporation. And so a third of the church in that definition,
in time spent.
Yes, in time is corporation. To me, the church is a living organism and not a corporation. And when we incorporate, that means it comes with competition. And then when you have competition, you have all kinds of unhealthy things that go with that. And then what are we in competition of? We are trying to create the best corporation to provide religious goods and services for Christian consumers. And that in and of itself, if you just hear that, is is not what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to have Christ in the center. We're supposed to be serving him. We're supposed to be completing the Great Commission. We're supposed to be working together. And yes, there's only one church in the city, but if we're incorporated to compete rather than complete, that's a problem.
One, I feel like that when we're centralized with so much being in one location, it costs so much money to do that, that I don't think, I know that decisions are made at times based on we don't want to lose money. We can't afford to lose money.
Well, sure, you were an executive and you were responsible for culture in a corporate structure. And your biggest frustration was the EBITDA, the bottom line of what was going on in the market. It was a public
That's
company,
right.
right?
Public traded company,
Yes. And
yes.
so you were supposed to be helping develop the culture, but then they would make decisions to eliminate some of your most effective people to help with the culture and even affect some of your decisions and direction, because the bottom line was we had to make a profit for all of our market share for our holders.
That's right. So can you imagine how frustrating that is? I'm supposed to create a better culture, but yet the EBITDA is dictating what we do, which means letting go of good people, even when there's the work to be done by those people. And so that contradicts creating good culture.
Yeah.
And so my experience in the mega church environment is it's no different. There's not an EBITDA, but there is.
Right.
Because the unfortunate part is it takes a lot of money to pay staff to care for people because we're centralizing care, and also a place for people to meet. And so therefore there's decisions that have to be made sometimes, and things that we might do, creating structures and things to do for people and creating an ecosystem that is really what people say they want or need, when in reality we are not able to often do what we know is best, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, there's in a corporate structure, when you bring that into kingdom life, it creates a lot of dysfunction. And we can talk about that in how there are many things that the hurt is directly related to the dysfunction of the system. But people hurt people. And so we have to also be aware of the fact that you can get hurt anywhere, in the
For
best
sure.
families, the healthiest families, around the healthiest people. So I want to make sure as we're talking about this that we understand that you're going to get hurt just in life, in the around the best family structures, around the best relationships, because that's what we do. We say things sometimes that people's feelings get hurt, they get offended, they get angry. That is going to happen. But there's also a reality that the way that the church is structured in the West is terribly dysfunctional.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because I think that really brings us to kind of where we want to go with this, is because like we said, you can be hurt in a simple church
Yes.
that meets in a home.
Oh,
It does. I mean,
absolutely.
is, and sometimes it feels a little more up close and personal because you
Right.
know people more.
Yeah.
And so there's that. But one of the things that I want to talk about is communication. And I think you said this earlier as we were talking about this, it's loss of dialogue and discovery. And I wonder, does that fit into what we want to talk about right now?
Well, I mean, the loss of dialogue and discovery is that we don't know how to dialogue about things anymore. Instead, we treat it like a ping pong match. We kind of discuss and we're trying to win, rather than in dialogue, we're trying to discover and to discern, where it's seeking to understand where each of us are in this conversation and in our thought process and even emotionally. If we don't have dialogue, we cannot get to discovery, and we cannot get to what I believe is true humility. I mean, unity that's based on humility.
And so let's say I've been wounded in the church, whether that's simple church, mega church, whatever. How does this dialogue and discovery play into my healing process?
Well, one of the things that we need to do is always seek to understand, and then ask, and we've covered this before about asking questions about where you are in this process. Help me understand. And then starting to dialogue around certain things that used to, you could talk about, you know, political things. And I remember there was a day when you could watch politicians dialogue about differences in
Mm,
policy, and they were not so hateful and mean
right.
and competitive and attacking and angry and against one another. Because I think there is a loss of dialogue
Mhm.
even in our culture. Well, help me understand why you believe that. Have you thought about this? I mean, we just don't do that anymore. We tend to attack, write them off, and say, "Oh, you're left liberal woke or you're right MAGA," and I don't, and both of you, I can't stand you and I hate you, and we don't dialogue around each other to try to understand where people are coming from.
Yeah, I revisited the book Unoffendable, and one of the things he says is that we have an anger culture. And I do believe that there is some truth to that. That, we get on X to look at all the things that people are doing. And I mean, I've even found myself at times saying, I don't need to look at this because it incites anger in me when I see certain things. And so there's just so much out there that is creating division and angst and anger where I'm offended by everything. I've been hurt by the church. What do I do with that? And what should I think we need to be asking ourselves, what should my response be to that? And so I feel that it's important, one, to look at what do the scriptures say about our level of forgiveness toward people and what does forgiveness really mean? And then also just kind of how I do think we should start with always when we've been offended. An offense, when we've been hurt or offended, we should always make an attempt to have a conversation with someone.
Mhm.
It doesn't matter if they're the president of the company, if they are the admin, if they're a coworker, we should always attempt to do that. But that's not always possible. So starting with trying to have a conversation, I think, is an important part. And that's an art I think we've lost, is we think everything about conflict or confronting someone is negative. And the truth is, in this culture, a lot of times it is negative because people just can't have, as you said, healthy dialogue.
Right.
But we should start by attempting to do that. Any
Mm.
thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, if we are structured in church in such a way that we live life together, that we're used to having crucial and critical conversations, meaning that there will be conflict in our relationships, and we learn how to deal with it in a healthy way, then I think that we can help overcome some of this hurt. And a lot of it is having the maturity, emotional maturity, and that's a whole nother issue, is that often that we are under so much trauma and emotional immaturity that we do not know how to deal with stuff as adults. So when I was a child, I acted like a child, I reasoned like a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. That 1 Corinthians 13:11 is directly connected to all those love passages, and love is a choice. And so
Hmm.
when I choose love, I make choices to forgive, to love, to be long suffering, all of those things, because I am an adult. I am mature in Christ. So that kind of love never fails. And that's what we need. Love is patient, love is kind. That's what we need in this process.
I was just thinking about a story. There's been a couple times specifically where I've been wounded in the church, and one of them was our own church that we were leading, and to the point that I met with a friend who's a professional counselor because I needed someone that was kind of outside of this world that I was living in, just to have a fresh perspective. And she asked me what had been the hardest part about this wound, and I said, feeling misunderstood. Like, no one ever came to me and asked what was the truth of what happened. It was just hatred toward me about things with no opportunity to defend myself or to
Right.
say what really happened. And I believe that feeling misunderstood, because I know my desire to want to walk in character and things that honor Jesus, being misunderstood for me is probably, I mean, I can get teary eyed talking about it because I hate that more than
Right.
anything. And one of the things that she just reminded me of is how misunderstood Jesus was.
Right.
And I really have leaned into that, thinking that, if we're going to, when we talk about identifying with suffering, means we're identifying with Jesus, that I have to be willing to suffer like Jesus. And by no means did I suffer on a cross, but that was my cross. to feel misunderstood and not, and that Jesus never defended himself. And that was something that, and I think that if that could help someone to know that often we are misunderstood in things, but at the end of the day, God is the one that knows the truth. And I know that's hard to walk in, but it helped me.
Yeah. Speaking of misunderstood, let me ask you this and let's talk about this. Do you think that when we talk about church, do you think it's held at a misunderstood standard? Meaning that the expectation of being in church is that those people will not hurt me? Do you think that
Absolutely.
affects this? What
I
we're
do.
talking
I
about?
think that we put, I mean, there is a reality for people who are leaders. We are held to a higher standard. The scriptures say that we are, when you're teaching the word of God, that you're held at a higher standard.
Right.
So there is that truth, but it doesn't say we're not still people, that
Yeah.
leaders are not still people. And so I think that we do hold people at a standard that's not, it's not reasonable.
Sure. And I'm not
People,
talking just about
I'm
leadership.
talking about anybody. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but you were
agree. I
saying
did say
leadership.
leader, but also just anybody.
Yeah.
We have an expectation that when we get around people within the church, that they're supposed to be, I'm not sure really what it is. I don't, it's like fairies. Like
Well,
everything's
yes.
supposed to be happy and good. And
That's my point. Everybody's supposed to be perfect in their communication except me. I can make mistakes and say dumb stuff, but no one else can. And that's a problem to me. It's a total misunderstanding of what the purpose of the church is made up of people. The church is people. It's not an organization. It's actually a living organism and it's people. And people are going to hurt one another. So there's a part of me, quite honestly, that's just like, we have to work through this. It just like you should work through it at your job. And I know there are places in many of us in our jobs that we don't work through it very well there. So part of this is almost like when people say, I don't want to be a part of a church because it's a bunch of hypocrites. I'm like, well, you go to work, don't you? You go to the gym, don't you? There are hypocrites everywhere. And so we have to face the reality of the world that the people walk in broken patterns. So how are we going to start redeeming those patterns in our own behavior and be the change that we want to see by start dealing with this stuff and bringing healing?
I've had some people that just friends that have said things that are hurtful before and that are part of our church community. And I think the thing that's really helped me is realizing how broken I am and keeping perspective and walking in humility in the fact that I'm broken. How many times have I said things because I have such a direct personality? But also, I want to say that not saying things sometimes and being complicit is also equally as hurtful to people. And what I mean by that is if you're in a room full of people and someone who you know that someone else is basically criticizing, and you don't say, I don't believe that to be true of that person, and you're quiet and complicit, can also be hurtful. So I think sometimes we think it's just the loudmouths that are hurtful,
Right.
and it's not the quiet ones that can be
So
hurtful.
you're saying that not only can you hurt with your words of saying something, you can hurt with your silence.
Absolutely.
Okay. That's a really important piece. So there's times when we're silent that we should speak up.
That's right.
There's probably times when we speak up
That we should have been
should have
silent.
been silent.
But the other piece of this is that because I've made so many mistakes in my communication, it's really taught me to be more gracious toward other people when they do. When they
Right.
genuinely say, I wish I wouldn't have said that. Because what the prideful part of me wants to say, maybe you wished you wouldn't have said that, but you probably really mean it. But I know for a fact that I've said things before out of just frustration or anger that I really didn't mean. And I can't put the toothpaste back in the toothpaste tube. I can't take it back. So I would want people to believe me when I said, I really wish I wouldn't have said that. No matter what the reason I shouldn't have said it, it was wrong. And so I'm able to be more gracious toward other people when they say things or do things within the church. And I also can't judge other people's motives. Like I don't know what people's motives are. That is just, I'm not capable of that. I can have suspicions and I can have things that I think might be true
Perceptions.
and perceptions, but I just, at the end of the day, only God can judge motives. And so when I've started to learn that I can't judge people's motives, I have to take them at their word, and that the relationship is more important than me being right, things change for me.
That's
And it's
really
not
good.
to say that I don't still struggle with being angry or hurt or offended, but the most important thing is I have to choose Jesus, the relationship, and forgiveness over all of those hurts.
Yeah. So here's some of the things I heard you say. My perception is not reality, meaning what I think or what I feel may not be
Yes.
reality. So I have to learn to seek to understand.
Mhm.
Also, that I must learn to seek redemption rather than caring always about being right. And that's a big issue, that I'd rather be right than redemptive.
Oswald Chambers, I
That
think.
that will never bring about the type of relationship that we need to walk in community over the long haul. Being right all the time is a problem. And that's what I meant by dialogue and discovery. One of the key pieces that dialogue and discovery does, it eliminates the I have to be right all the time.
Mm.
Because discovery is about, we're lifelong learners. And if you're lifelong learners, you don't say, well, this is right and this is wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong. Is very similar. It's very similar to that John 4 conversation, where I know we're talking about Jesus here, but it's real common for, the Samaritans to say, well, our culture says this. And Jesus was talking about, well, Israel says that. And that there is often these conversations of, we're right and you're wrong culturally. I know Jesus is the Son of God. I'm not saying that his words aren't perfect and he's not perfect. I know he is. But I'm just saying that's one of those examples that we get in these cultural battles at
Mhm.
time, rather than learning that we're all learners. And that helps us in this
Mhm.
process of being a continual learner. And dialogue and discovery is far more Eastern. In Western, we tend to think there's only these right answers. It is either or. It can't possibly be both and there's a lot of things that are both and. God is both just and he is loving. He's salt and he is light. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've talked a lot kind of around. So
Yes.
I think we need to probably talk a little bit more about anger's a real thing.
Yeah.
Hurt is a real thing. Some people have been deeply wounded and sexually abused, emotionally abused, that need, deep help and
Sure.
work to work through those stories and the things that have happened. So if you've been in a position where you've experienced that type of trauma in the churches that you were part of and among the Christian community, you should get that type of help. But I also think that for the average person who leaves a church or a church community or a family of God because they've been hurt, I think there's some choices that we have to make in order to be better and not be bitter. For me personally, the choice is it's knowing that I have a choice, first of all, knowing that I can choose forgiveness, that I don't have a right to my anger, that that's not pleasing to God. And ultimately, I do have to choose to be a big girl and say, I've got to forgive. It's actually hurting me, burdening me to carry around judgment and trying to figure out what the motive was and believing things I don't know to be true or not true. It just creates more of a burden on me. And it's actually freeing to be able to say, I choose forgiveness. Because one, I know God is pleased with that, but also it's just an unnecessary weight that I don't need to carry.
Choosing unforgiveness and anger every day is a poison and a prison to our own hearts and lives. And if we choose to forgive as Christ forgave us, then we'll find a truth that will set us free. And that is what we need in our lives. I want to be free. Don't you want to be free?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so Christ offers that for us.
Well, I was just thinking about a more recent, kind of wounding from the church. I don't want to make it sound like, yes, it is a choice, but I think that sometimes that choice has to be made over and over and over again. Meaning it's not always like I make a choice today and I'm never going to experience anger
Right.
or frustration
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. You have to
And so
forgive over and over again.
it's taken me several years to get to a place where I feel like it's not a daily choice to say, I forgive. I'm moving forward. I'm letting that go. I'm not going to hold on to that. My relationship with God has nothing to do with that wound. It's me and God, like me and God in the sense that I'm not going to walk away from Jesus because other people have hurt me, but people do. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit. I've been hurt by the church and I'm just going to give up on God. What do you think about that?
Well, one, that church is not an institution. So there's things that happen to us that are the result of an institution. Like there have been people who have been pushed out of jobs in churches, leadership, and other things because of business decisions or things that are church. I mean, one of the things that I've been asked before, are you okay with firing people? And it's like in a church structure, you fire people. Those are the kind of things that can create all kinds of hurt.
Yeah.
So then the question is, well, okay, how do we deal with that? Well, we need to realize that the church is people and relationships. And there are things that happen in these institutional systems that create decisions by people that do wound us. And so then the question is what am I going to do with those relationships? Well, I need to forgive, but there's also a reality that maybe I ought to start functioning as church like around a table, a dinner table, church in relationship rather than an institution, a program, a religious goods and services. Maybe I should start walking with people in disciple making relationships that is more organic than organizational.
So, in some of our simple churches, we have seen people hurt each other.
Yes.
What makes it different in those smaller settings, dealing with that type of conflict versus in a large, more corporate setting?
Well, at least there, a lot of the institutional trappings that are not, it's not motivated by money. It's a conflict in relationship that I think it brings simplicity to how you have to deal with. You either deal with it or you don't. And we've seen a lot of people not deal with it well. And that's what I mean is that this is very complicated because you could say, well, it's all the, it's all the system's fault. But even in that system, there are people. And you're going to get hurt there and you're going to get hurt even. There's no perfect.
You're going to get hurt everywhere.
You're going to get hurt everywhere. That's the point. And so you have to learn to be unoffendable, that we have been dead to this world and alive in Christ. And so how do I live as a dead man?
That's really good.
That's the question, because you can't hurt a dead man. He's already dead. So, and what does that even mean? Yeah. And those are the kind of things I want to talk about next. What does it mean to be dead? And what does that mean to be dead to this world and alive to Christ? And how can that help us in this situation? I know we're talking in circles a lot during this, but I wanted to do that intentionally and then come back with some clear direction with principles in the next time that we come together in part two.
I do want to close out with just some clarity about a few things. Some of the things that I think are clear is that the scriptures say that we must forgive.
Right.
We must walk into forgiveness. And it's not just 7 times, but it's 7 times 77, right? Yeah. So forgiveness is endless. We have to do it over and over again. That I do have to take responsibility for the hurt that other people might have caused by saying, I'm not going to hold the place of bitterness toward other people. I have to choose that and die to that every day in order for me to walk in the life that Jesus wants for me. So I have choices to make. I have a choice to stay engaged in community. I was talking to one of my kids and they talked about how some of their friends will fight like cats and dogs with their siblings, but at the end of the day, they're in it together. Yeah. And that's how we see our relationship too, that we always say divorce never, murder maybe. That's a joke, by the way. But we may fight about things and hurt each other, but at the end of the day, we're in this together. And I'm not going to walk away from this. Even if you hurt me intentionally, I'm not going to walk away from this. And I can't let other people wounding me, let me to walk away from God.
Yeah. So we do the right things
for the right reasons,
no matter the results, because Jesus is enough. So a lot of this that we're talking about is about mentoring, discipleship, and maturity leadership development. And that's something that I believe is lacking in the way that we do church in the West. Mm-hmm. And so we are saying, hey, can we be bold enough to do something old and get back to walking in community, life to life, instead of seeking out things that serve me, programs for me, and start living a purpose for disciple making the way Jesus called us to.
Yeah, because I was thinking about how so many things we do in the American church is about how can we teach people about certain things, whether it's spiritual growth, emotional growth, whatever, parenting, whatever the case may be, without any accountability, without any relationship in that. One of my kids was saying how they felt like they needed to learn more about life and what God says about that. And I said, but that doesn't happen in a classroom. That happens life on life.
Yep.
And so we're still looking for other people to just give us these answers without really internalizing and being accountable and working through the hard stuff. And I think because we don't want to work through the hard stuff, we stay in a place of bitterness and unforgiveness and not growing the way that we should.
Yeah, there's a disassociation and disconnecting from nose to nose modeling that we see in Deuteronomy 6. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. And he goes on to talk about, as a community and as parents, teach your children as you're crawling, walking, standing, everywhere you're going along the road and in life, teaching them nose to nose the ways of God. And we have totally lost that in our culture. And that is so important. And you cannot just lecture or teach that. It has to be modeled. You have to assist, you have to watch, and then you launch or leave whenever that person has developed not only those skills, but that type of character to fully function in life as a healthy, mature follower of Christ.
I just know for me, and I think this is something that others could do, is I think it's really important to sit with the Lord and just say, where are areas that I've been offended that I'm still holding on to that are affecting who I am today, both personally, like in my family, how I respond to people, and how I'm approaching what it means to walk with God and be a part of the church, the family of God.
So you're saying physically maybe make a list or journal it out?
I think really sitting with the Lord, asking, where are some things that I'm still holding on to stuff?
Okay.
And write those things down and bring those before God and ask him to help you. This is not something you have to do alone.
Right.
Ask him. I mean, we just need to ask God to help us. It doesn't have to be, we need to start saying, I want to forgive. Lord, help me to be willing to forgive. Help me to forgive. And he's gonna do that. And I love how God does things that over time, when we surrender moment by moment, step by step with him, that you look back a year later and say, I'm not that same person.
That's so good.
And I know that for those that have been hurt by the church and by Christians, that God wants to do a deep work in you. He wants to take that and he wants to use it in a way that is going to radically change your life and your relationships.
But that reminds me, after you write that, maybe it'd be really good when you get to a place of letting that go to write a death notice.
Oh yeah, let's do that another day.
Okay, so we'll talk about another day or next time.
Next time, let's talk about what is a death notice.
Okay, we'll work on that and talk about what does it mean to write out my own death notice, because to live is Christ, to die is gain.
Yes. All right. So until next time, thank you for listening. We know that we
we talked in
circles today.
It was important to do that, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And there's a lot of things that we want to talk about in upcoming episodes. How to become unoffendable.
Yeah.
What does it mean to walk as a dead man? Writing out your death notice. That's a whole episode in itself. And just if you have other things that you want to hear us talk about related to this or other things, let us know through our email, and all that will be in the show notes. And so thanks for joining us around a topic that we know is hard and hurtful to a lot of people. We're not minimizing that in any way, but we also know that in our culture that we sometimes sit way too long in our pain without making choices to do something about it. And so we want to help nudge you to do something about it.
Yes. God wants his bride to be both deep and wide, meaning that we'd be deep in the things of God and walk in that knowing him, but also broadly share his gospel and take his message to the ends of the earth, making disciples who make disciples and seeing multiplication happen along with good, healthy stewardship.
All right. So until next time, thanks for joining us.
God bless.